To continue on our discussion of different Windows events, in the beginning of this lecture we talked about window events, and I mentioned that we will also talk about mouse events. Now I want to actually talk about these mouse events. The mouse event listener classes or listener interfaces provided by Java give us the ability to listen for events like pressing or releasing the buttons on the mouse, moving the mouse, or dragging the mouse over a component. There are two interfaces that provide us these capabilities, and you can see them right here. I'm implementing both of them in this program. One is called the mouse motion listener, and the other is called the mouse listener. The mouse listener interface provides 5 event handling methods that we must write code for in our programs. The first one is mouse pressed. Mouse pressed is executed when the mouse is pressed on a component. So when you, for example, when you're clicking a button or when you're clicking on a component on the screen, the mouse pressed event is executed. The mouse released is executed when the mouse button was pressed but then is subsequently released while over a component in your program. The mouse clicked happens anytime you click the mouse button while the program is running. The mouse entered. Think of the mouse entered, for those of you who've done web development, it's sort of like the mouse over. It's when the mouse enters the bounds of a component. It raises like a mouse over event. In this case, in Java, it's called mouse entered. Mouse exited occurs when the mouse cursor leaves the boundaries of a component. That event is thrown. The mouse motion listener provides 2 additional event handling methods. The first is the mouse dragged, and that occurs whenever the mouse is moved while the primary mouse button, usually the right mouse button, is clicked. Or I'm sorry, the left mouse button, not the right. The mouse moved event handler or method is raised or called anytime the mouse is moved when the button is not pressed. So any movement of the cursor will raise the mouse moved event. Now I have some sample code up here that takes advantage of this. This is actually a program that you're going to build called the drawing pad. It essentially allows you to write on the screen within the program by handling certain mouse events and operating in a particular fashion. I'm just going to show you how and what you have to do to implement the mouse motion listener and the mouse listener events, rather than going through step by step what each line of the program does. We'll do that when we do the review of the program. So you see the implements mouse motion listener and mouse listener. When it comes to implements, while you can only extend or inherit from one class, you can implement as many classes as you need to. So you could implement and handle as many different event interfaces as you chose. You're not limited to just one. So in this case, we're going to implement both the mouse motion listener and the mouse listener because we want events from both sets of interfaces. When we need to let Java know that we want to listen to mouse events from our program, and we're going to do that by when we want to listen for events that are provided by the mouse motion listener interface. We are going to call the add mouse motion listener method. Again, normally we would provide the name of the class, the object name of the class that will be handling these events. However, if we're writing all of the event handler code in the same class that our window is located in, we would use the keyword this. Since we are also using events that are handled out of the mouse listener class, again, we have to call the add mouse listener method. And again, we provide it with the name of the object for the class that will be handling those events. If it's the same class as our window is defined in, we will use the keyword this. You'll see a main method here. Again, we can have a main method inside a class, and even though that class might be defining a literal object, I did this just to save time and put everything in one place. The big thing that we need to look at here are all the different mouse events that we need to deal with. Additionally, we've also added window handler events here as well. Notice I have a lot of these with empty curly brackets. Remember the rule for interfaces. We must implement every method provided by an interface should we choose to implement that interface. That means that if we implement the mouse listener, we've got 5 events we have to deal with. If we do the mouse motion listener, we've got 2 events we have to deal with, whether or not we're going to use them all. The problem that we run into here is how do we deal with those that we don't need, that we don't want to do anything with? We simply write out their method headers and put in a set of curly brackets with no code in between. That is perfectly fine. We just have to have this at a minimum in our code. Sadly, Java doesn't provide a class to handle these events for us like it does with the Windows adapter. I would love a mouse adapter class. I really would like a mouse adapter class, but Java doesn't provide one for us. So we're going to have to do this on our own. What are we using in here? Well, we're using the mouse pressed method, and the mouse pressed comes from the mouse listener. We're also using mouse dragged. Mouse dragged comes from the mouse motion listener. So as you can see, we've got 1 from each, but we have to implement the other 7, including mouse moved, or the other 5. We still have to implement all 7 events. You can see the setup here. One of the arguments that come as a mouse event, there is a way to ask if the right mouse button is clicked, and we can say me, which I've just done for short as mouse event dot is meted down, allows us to ask, has the right mouse button been clicked? And we'll go over the details of this in the once you guys have had a chance to build this application. But for the moment, I just wanted to go over these various events, and I wanted to show you how you can handle some of those events that you really don't want to do anything with. Even though you're forced to write the code in your program, what do you do with it? Well, how do you let Java know that you don't want to do anything when that event occurs? And we do that by just simply saying, don't do anything. Don't put any code in between the curly brackets. Again, if you have any questions on this or anything that we've talked about in class so far, feel free to email me. When you go to the next slide, you can build this application. You'll see all the source code to help you build this application in NetBeans. And when you're finished, we'll do the walkthrough.